Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 2L Pucks Hockey Chat with Scott and Chris. Today is Wednesday, March 4th. Welcome. We have some juicy nuggets of topics to get into. So, Scotty, would you like to go first?
Sure. So we're just gonna cover something pretty quick. So the offsides rule. It's been around, pretty much the start of the game. If the player goes across the blue line before the puck, it's considered to be offsides. And so as video review has come into the league, the ability for linesmen to get the call right has come with pros and cons. And one of those things has been really taking the ability to make the call out of the official's hands and putting it into the hands of replay and the coaches.
Right.
And so, there's been some arguments on both sides. One side would say, stop disrupting the flow, let the
Right.
officials make the call. If they get it close, hey, that's great. Other sides would say, if we have the technology, let's make the call, let's get it right. So recently, and by recently I mean within the last couple days, the GMs have met in Florida, and they've decided to approach the offsides rule with a new interpretation. So the rule itself will not change, but the interpretation that they are adopting is to allow the linesman to make a call so that it's not that the skate has to be on the ice, it's that the skate has to be on the other side of the line at the instant the puck
The
crosses the
leading
line.
skate.
So a player right now the rule says a player is onside when either of his skates are in contact with or on his own side of the line at the instant the puck completely crosses the leading edge of the blue line. So what they're saying is if the back skate is in the air,
Right.
but it has not crossed over the leading edge of the blue line, then the play is considered on sides. And
Right.
previously, it's been if the skate has been off of the ice, meaning not in contact with the ice, obviously. Um, Even though it's been on the other side of the blue line, they have made the call. So
Right. Right.
some interesting statistics. The NHL has said there were 18 coaches challenged through 1,015 games played this season for skates in the air. And 14 of those challenges led to goals being removed. So, team scores a goal. The instant replay shows that the skate was in the air, and 14 out of 18 have resulted in goals being called back. 26 skate in the air challenges last season, 16 goals removed. So they're not rewriting the rule. They are
Right.
just making it easier for the linesman to make the call. I kind of agree with this.
Right.
If it's blatant offsides, you're talking, you know, players across the line well before the puck, sure, like let's get that rule right. But if it's a, uh, you know, skate came in the air, but it's still on the right side of the line. Like, let's let the linesmen who are on the ice, let's let the flow of the game continue. The only concern that was voiced at the GM meeting about the skate being in the air is could a player potentially try and do some crazy acrobatics to try and keep their skate
Right.
on the other side of the line,
Right.
and would those acrobatics potentially cause an injury?
Right.
We saw last night in a game, player got his eye or his eyelid cut and required 90 stitches to close that up. Fortunately, the eye is okay, but skates come up; they're incredibly sharp. Who knows what could possibly happen.
Right.
So I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good to contribute to the flow of the game. I think it'll be good to get the calls right when they need to, but allow the game to flow and not really change that momentum when a goal is called back.
Right. Scotty, just to be clear, and just so I understand it properly, and that was an excellent description of it. The the front skate must be touching the
No,
beginning of the blue line.
No,
Before the puck is completely clear the blue line?
nope. So you
Like
can
the puck has to be clearly over?
your front. So right. So your front skate can be completely across the blue line before the puck. You have to have another skate anchored
Touching.
outside of the zone,
Got it. And if
not
it's not,
touching. So the leading skate can be across the line before the puck.
meaning what if here's my question, and I
Sure.
understand exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
If a guy's gliding in only on one leg, right?
Yes.
He's pushed
Yes.
off, he's only on one leg. Where does that one skate need to be in order for the play to be onside?
So the leg that would be considered the anchor leg, we'll just call it that,
Yeah.
must be on the other side of the leading edge of the blue line.
Other side of the leading
So the leading edge,
edge.
yeah. So the leading edge would be the edge closest to the goal.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that skate must be behind that leading edge. The puck also must completely cross the blue line.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
understand. Okay.
So that's the way that happens. But if you watch games, especially on the power plays, they will
Yeah.
have a forward who straddles the blue line and has one skate in the zone and the other skate
Right.
out of the. So that happens all the time.
You know, there are different sports that treat the lines and the boundaries and the lines on the field or in the rink differently. Because in hockey the lines are so wide. It's not like a, like a little, it's a like a foot wide, you know. That's why I wanted to clarify exactly how they were treating the front edge and the back edge of those lines.
Sure. Yep. Yep. And again,
Got it.
this is really it's the same reason why they got rid of the red line for the two line pass. It's really
Right.
to keep the game going, keep it at speed.
Right.
And this is one of those things. Plus, I got to be honest with you too. There are plenty of players who have gotten hurt trying to stay on sides, and so they whip out that leg. They may hurt themselves. They may plant
Right.
wrong. They could trip somebody and hurt somebody. So
Right.
this provides a little bit of safety feature as well to be built into the rule.
Right. Very good. Interesting. So what was the ultimate outcome of the decision-making process there? When does this go into effect?
So I believe this should go into this still. So this interpretation still has to go to the. So it's going to the GMs, but it also has to go to the competition committee. So once it's approved by the competition committee, it then has to be approved by the NHL Board of Governors. So this was kind of like you want to call it a breakout session.
Okay.
So with breakout session, GMs are going to put the recommendation to the NHL, to the NHL Players Association. That's a joint competition committee
Right.
to see if they concur with interpreting the rule this way.
Right.
Then once the competition committee approves it, which again is a combination of players and GMs,
Right.
then it will go to the Board of Governors, and then the Board of Governors would vote on it, and it could become official before the start of the next season. So we won't see it this year. It's kind of like one of those. It's just not going to be this year.
So they're just taking their time with this process, but they want to make sure that they address it one way or the other, so it's in
Yep.
effect potentially for next season.
Yeah, and they could always make a statement, say, hey, look, this is going to be an interpretation next year. I don't want to say they're going to try it in the playoffs because the playoffs are never the time to try new things.
Right.
But I mean, we saw the Sean Avery rule come into effect during the playoffs before. So something like that could happen. They could say, yeah, we agree with this and we want to implement it right away. And
Yep.
that would have to come from the players as well as GMs on that competition
Right.
committee. Yeah.
Good stuff. I agree with it. I agree with the rule. I'm glad to see it being implemented, or hopefully hopefully implemented. So I think it's a step in the right direction. No pun intended.
God.
I really didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, whatever.
You kind of see what I did there.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to follow up with anything?
Yeah, so let's stay with the GM meeting.
Yes.
So another announcement that came out that's pretty big is that the salary cap for next season is projected to be between 84 and
Yeah.
$88.2 million.
Yep.
That came from Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley. That's something he told them before they broke at the end of the 3 days that they've had. So the salary cap for this season is 81.5 million.
Hmm.
The range is based on the maximum 5% inflator that the NHLPA could trigger.
Right.
And so the 84 million is with a 0% inflator. The 88.2
Right.
is the if they decide to go a full
For the
5%.
max, for the full five. Right.
That's right. So the NHLP Players Association triggered a 1% inflator to get to $81.5 million this season. So we're not going to know what the salary cap is until late June,
Right.
which is fine. Teams aren't making transactions really until after the Stanley Cup is over. So that's fine. But they've just and the June date is really just based upon the way that the CBA is written. They're going to find out right around the time of the draft. But yeah, so again, and something else too that came out along those same lines is the CBA. So the
Right.
CBA, the current CBA, is set to expire at the end of the 21-22 season. So we have we have the 2021 and then the 21-22. So 2 more years under the current CBA.
Right.
There's been some discussions, and so we'll see how that goes. I think one of the sticking points again is going to be the Olympics. We'll see, kind of where that plays out. Obviously, they have 2 years to kind of figure that out and decide whether or not that's going to be in there. So right now, I mean, there's nothing to worry about when it comes to that. We'll see the inflator for the salary cap. Something will likely come out of that this year. There'll be another inflation next year. But the thing to watch will be how contract negotiations go in the off season for restricted free agents as well as free agents, because our team's going to start looking at and taking into account the potential for a CBA or a lockout if they can't agree to one in 2 years. So long-term deals may not happen. We may only see those 2-year deals to coincide with the end of the current collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
So there was another one last thing I want to hit on too. So there was some discussion. So the NHL is good and bad. They have some really great marketing, and then they have some really great stories that somehow turn into an opportunity to really just kill the spirit of the story, right? We had a player voted to the All-Star game who didn't play like an All-Star, but it was fans, flooded the votes and got a player in that was a player favorite, and then voted that guy to be the MVP of
Right.
the All-Star game. And then what did the NHL do the next year? They changed the way that voting happens so
Right.
that you only get to vote for like two players, right? Like, so they really just destroyed the opportunity to continue on with something like that. So fast forward to this year,
Yeah.
uh, Carolina Hurricanes were put in a position where both their starting and backup goalies were injured in the same game. So in comes the emergency backup goalie, and again we go back to David Ayers. He played? Ended up winning the game.
Yep.
42 years old, came out. Zamboni driver, suits up for practices, that kind of stuff. But played 29 minutes, 8 saves, and became the oldest goalie in history to win his regular season debut. Right? Great story. Carolina marketed the crap out of it,
Yep.
made shirts. He actually gets a cut of the profits.
Right. His stick went
It's
into the Hall of Fame.
what's that?
His stick went into like the Hall of
Yeah,
Fame.
it's crazy, right? So what happens? Well, the rumor was that going into these meetings, that the NHL was going to reevaluate how they handled emergency backup goaltenders.
That's because of Toronto. Toronto just cries about things.
It's yes, it's crazy.
They just
So
cry and cry and cry.
I mean, these emergency
That all
backup.
stemmed from Toronto.
Yeah, it's well, I'm sure it did. Carolina loved it. Toronto probably was upset because the guy was actually from Toronto.
He was a Toronto part of the Toronto organization.
Yeah, so it was a native son who won it. So yeah, so the way that the emergency
Silly.
backup goalie rule works is that the home team must provide somebody in the building to play for either team.
I
You
heard the
know,
last I heard on this was that they weren't going to touch it. They were just going to
so
leave it the way they said. There's no reason to touch it.
that's exactly right. So finally, the NHL
I'm
got
sorry to
one.
steal your thunder, Dad, but
No,
that's
no,
I
no,
didn't mean to
that's
jump in
fine.
like that.
That's fine. So finally, the NHL got something right. Is really the
Yes.
point. So they got
Yeah.
something right. So they're not going to make any changes to the current procedure.
Right.
But the one thing that they did, that the commissioner came out and said, was that every emergency backup goaltender who has their name registered with the league's central registry department will require a physical exam prior to the season. Now, I got to be honest with you, that probably makes sense from a legal
Yeah.
perspective. Certainly you have a 42-year-old goaltender who I'm sure is flexible as all get out. But that guy pulls something, does something, somebody runs him over or whatever.
Right.
I'm sure there's some legality there. And really, what if Toronto in their emergency backup goaltender had a guy who was 50 years old, hadn't suited
Right.
up in 12 years? Now Carolina's
Right.
screwed, right? So,
Right.
I mean, I think it kind of makes sense that you put that in place. But
Right.
the point of this story is that the NHL finally got something right. They're not going to take away a feel good story or feel good opportunities. And that guy, he's going to be 80 years old, grandkids. Hey, let's
Yeah.
pop in the DVD and look at
Yep.
granddad
It's great stuff.
playing goal in the NHL. Yeah. So,
Good stuff.
yeah.
Very good, sir.
Yep.
My turn.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what I got.
You know, one thing that I've been thinking about it this season in general was player safety and the sport in itself. And you're seeing injuries and vicious hits. And as much as the NHL and the media would like to think that the sport's heading in the right direction and fighting is down and this and that, maybe the overall amount of fighting is down, but the hits that are happening, the fewer hits, seem to be more vicious. I mean, it seems like in the past you'd have a lot of hard hits and people would go, whoa, and the guys would get up and walk away or skate away. But it seems now there's more targeting going on. And the hits, because people feel like, well, I only get one hit, maybe I'll make the best of it type of mentality. But you're seeing a lot of crazy hits. But let's put that aside for a second. I can't remember, and as we know, I'm an Islander fan. Scotty, you're a Penguin fan. This year, more than I think I've ever seen as an Islander fan, are skate-related injuries. So you touched on it briefly before, Johnny Boychuk the other night. Thank God he is okay. For anyone who saw the replay of the game last night against Montreal, Johnny Boychuk is in front of his own goal. He's blocking out, and Montreal player falls forward. That player's skate comes right up into Boychuk's eye. He goes down, wreathing in pain, and just makes a blast of a dart off the ice straight into the supply room, into the locker room, where the trainers address the injury. Now, long story short, all well and good, 90 stitches after having cosmetic and plastic surgery to repair the damage to his eyelid. It missed his eye by millimeters, or else he would have been blind. So when people saw this replay and people at the game, the replay is terrible to watch. And obviously not going to show it here. I'm not going to show it here, but it's terrible to watch. And for anyone who watched that for the first time, probably in all confidence felt they just witnessed someone losing their eye, because it was that terrible of an accident. Obviously, the Montreal player felt terrible about it. They interviewed him afterwards. The Montreal coaching staff reached out to the Islanders, make sure he was okay, which was nice. But then we back up a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back maybe a month and a half. Casey Zizekas checking someone in the corner. Player he's checking falls forward. The back edge of the skate comes up, gets underneath some of the padding, and cuts deep into his leg muscle. He wreathing in pain. under his own power, barely under his own power. He gets off, and it happened to him close to the door to get off the ice. He's out. He's out for about 6 weeks. Still has not returned to the ice. Back up a little further. Cal Clutterbuck just returned to the ice after being away for about 6-7 weeks. He was checking someone in the corner. Person goes down, skate comes up, slices his wrist right above his glove on his left wrist. This guy skates right off the ice and was probably one of the nastiest looking still shots of a cut on a body part I've seen, but especially on this guy's wrist, who afterwards was quoted as saying that he feared for his life. It was that like awe-inspiring. It was just disgusting. Luckily, he's okay. He's taken a time. He's healed. He's back. He's skating. He's back in the games. One of two things has to happen, obviously, and we're talking about skate-related injuries specifically at this point in time, which is razor blades. People are skating around the rink on razor blades, and we have players who have padding in partial parts of their body. So if we were to address this from a realistic approach, one of two things has to happen. Either we cover up portions of the blade, or we provide more padding and protective gear to more regions of the players, right? Now, if you look at the back edge of a skate, where it comes to just a corner, a sharp little corner, when someone falls forward, those sharp corners come up. That's like a sword coming up at somebody, right? Couple questions, and I'm not a professional skater, and this is the type of discussion that I need, feedback from yourself or other people who want to chime in. We're live on Periscope right now. Nobody's viewing right now, but we need feedback on this, right? If you redesign the back edge of the skate and put protective pieces on the very back edge and very front edge, and obviously the base of the skate is still touching the contact, the same amount of contact point on the blade is still touching the ice, but at least you don't have a sword coming up, and that's what seems to be causing a lot of injuries. Is that an option? Probably not, because now you're changing the design and the weighting of a skate, and it's going to feel different on a player's foot, which I believe would be the answer that almost everyone would give me who's a skater, right? Then it leads to option B, which is more protective gear for a skater. Now, why is it that if we have players skating around with razor blades on their feet, that we don't have protective gear everywhere? The fact that, only after someone suffers an extremely damaging injury to their head do we see the full protective facial gear on a helmet. And of course, that full, facial protection is clear. Why do they have that? So they don't get hurt. And now, of course, they can play. They can see in every direction. Why is that not just mandatory for everything, all full time? What's the thought running through your head right there? It's the same way. Listen, hockey used to be a sport. Listen, Scotty, hockey was a sport where goalies used to not wear masks. Then they wore molded pieces of plastic to their face, so the impact still hit them, but I don't know what it did. It still broke bones. And then we got into helmets. And then we got to helmets, then we get into the skaters who weren't, required to wear helmets. And now they are required to wear helmets. So there's a progression here. And I don't think we can dismiss the graduation of safety element. I don't think we're at a finishing point with addressing the safety aspect of the players.
So there's a couple things to unwrap here. When you talk about the players of old who didn't wear helmets, didn't wear masks, those types of things, there's a couple reasons why they could get away with that. So one of them was the sticks didn't have curves on them, right? So you weren't lifting the puck up really off the ice as much or without as much force. I mean, you weren't whipping that thing around, right? You're talking about heavy pieces of wood,
But
solid
they
wood.
were.
No, 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 they weren't. If you watch
Well,
the
then why
games,
did they go?
I'm telling. So just hear me out. Hear
Pictures
me
of
out.
the goalies' faces from back then are
Right.
ripped apart.
Okay, but again, just so hold on, right? So you're also talking about guys. So the the athleticism was different then as well. Guys would show up to training camp, and you had to have training camp because over the summer they would do nothing to stay in shape. They would show up pounds overweight and slow, and so the athleticism was not there. They weren't blasting 90-mile-an-hour slap shots. The slap shot really even wasn't a thing until the game progressed. Right. So as the curves started coming in, pucks started getting lifted, guys were concentrating more on those slap shots, the game changed. You got to remember too, at the rinks, a lot of rinks didn't have glass, right? Some of them had chain link fences, but I mean, there wasn't those rinks were not. They didn't provide protection, right? So now, yes, perfect example. I'm seeing you got Terry Sawchuk up there, and you look at all the stitches, right? So goalies, if they're sprawling on the ground, they're taking those shots, right? Like I can't remember who it was, and it might have been Terry who was telling a story about how he took a puck off the head, basically had a flap of skin. So he went over to the bench, got that flap of skin stitched back up, and went right back out on the ice, right? So yeah, I'm not saying it was less dangerous. What I'm saying is the percentage of those shots that came up and did that type of damage, it just wasn't there. Now, continue to as we progress through the game, players have become faster. They've become bigger. There's a lot more of a focus on hitting. Now, you can go back to the Broad Street Bullies who like all they did was just hit people and just knock the stuffing out of people, right? But you saw the progression of the game get to the point where players are faster, they're stronger, and that's the game. So one of the things that has been suggested to try and get rid of those injuries because is making the NHL rink the size of an Olympic rink, making it international, increase the playing surface. So that way there's less of a chance for people to run into each other. These guys that are fast and blowing through the neutral zone at top speed aren't going to be as susceptible to those hits because of the ability or because of the open ice. When you talk about the area behind the net, right, there's more room to maneuver. It's wider from the back of the net to the boards a little bit, and it's wider from corner to corner, right? So you have those things. Now, when you get to the idea of the face mask, so I can see both sides of this. I can tell you that, growing up as a kid, we played with face masks, and it really wasn't because of the puck. It was because of other people's sticks or skates, like being kicked, not with a blade, but actually being kicked in the face, falling down, hitting my face, those types of things, right? So we had to play those. Even in college now, guys have to play. We talk about the masks now that are clear. Well, that works sometimes. Other guys will play with wire, but I can tell you that mask comes straight down and then angles. So it still affects the peripheral vision of the player trying to look down and see the puck. Because I can tell you, I have a habit of seeing things in my peripheral vision just because in hockey it taught me you keep your head up even if you have the stick on the or the puck on your stick, because as soon as you put your head down somebody's going to come and just pop you right in the head, right? So it's head up all the time. That messes anything that's in front of your face, no matter what it is, messes with your peripheral vision. So I can understand when players say that it detracts from their ability to fully see the puck. And so when you made this, oh, you can see everywhere. Yes, it's clear, but that doesn't mean that it's still not affecting their ability to see the puck. And if they have to look down, that in that split second, they could end up getting run, right? Like players are just looking for those types of things. Um,
I
with
hear
regard,
you, but
go ahead.
listen, I'm with you, but I want you to take this from the direction of we can't be done addressing safety. We should never really be done addressing safety. I'm going to use car racing as an example. From the beginning of time with car racing, every year there's been improvements made, whether it's to the car, to the gear that the drivers are wearing, or to the track itself. Every single year, they find a way to make it safer, 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 safer. Are we done with hockey? Are you making an argument that there's no room, more room for improvement for safety gear?
So no, but
Okay.
what I will tell you is that you have the gloves that come up to a certain point, you have the elbow pads that go to a certain point, but the whole forearm is essentially open once you get up past that glove, right? Um, Equipment is functional. It's functional. So the weight, the way it sits, how far it covers you, all of those things, what it allows joints to be able to do, all of those things are functional. So it's not just you're putting pads on for the sake of having pads on. They design these things to act in a particular way, to absorb damage, to cover up certain areas. So the question I would pose back to you is, and I use shark attacks as an example. So I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, whatever, shark attacks were the big thing, right? It became all over the news. Oh my gosh, there's another shark attack today, another shark attack today, right? Well, when they took a step back and they looked at statistics and they said, there's not an increase in shark attacks. Sharks didn't all of a sudden just get a taste for blood, right? It's just now it's being reported. So, I guess I would have to go back and look and see, is it a sharp increase? Have the statistics been steady? But again, I go back to the way that the players play nowadays. You cannot take a full second to make a decision. It's a half second, no more. If you hold on to that puck longer than a half second, or you don't know what you're going to do with that puck, you're going to get hit. You expand the ice surface, and perhaps that changes, right? At the same time, when we talk about safety, it's not just the equipment. It's the way that the officials call the game. It's what they are willing to put up with. So with Boychuk last night, he's in front of the net. He gets basically cross-checked, falls forward, or I'm sorry. So no, Boychuk. I'm sorry. So the Canadians player falls forward. The skate comes up and hits Boychuk, who's in front of the net, right? So how long should the officials allow those cross checks or that boxing out, right? So I think there's ways to call the game and to send a message and to have the players play in a different way to avoid things like that. So I think there could be a combination of things, but I got to tell you, go ahead, go ahead.
And I
Well,
didn't expect it to be an easy discussion but the bottom line is this is begging this whole situation is begging for a tragedy. And I don't mean that in a good way. I
I
mean,
understand.
it's we've had enough close call until we get to that point where an arena, 18,000 person arena sold out watching a game is going to be witness to one of the most horrific deaths in sports history. It's not going to happen with another sport. It's going to happen in hockey because someone's going to get there. You know what? A skate's going to come up, Scotty. Listen, it's not that far off with what happened to Boychuk. That skate didn't slice his eyelid, and it could have come across the guy's neck.
Okay,
You know what?
but
And we're gonna
Ryan
see
Newman,
someone's neck get
Ryan
sliced.
Newman could have flipped over. Was that a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, at
He could have,
Daytona,
yeah, he could have flipped over um,
a
and
fireball.
died, right? Like,
You're,
so
you're
so
absolutely
I
right.
understand football. They have guys hit somebody wrong. They crush or snap a vertebrae. Or snap their neck. I mean, Ryan Shazier for the Steelers is the most recent
Guy,
one.
let's.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
hear. I get the comparison, but what auto racing? If we're going to take NASCAR as an example, okay, every aspect of what could potentially be a problem has been addressed with NASCAR. And look what happened with Ryan Newman. As bad as that looked, he went to a hospital, got checked out, and walked out of that hospital the very next morning with both daughters, his arm around both daughters, under his own steam. Just walked away. Right? So they address every aspect of it. Here, and the reason why they address every aspect of it is so someone in the worst circumstances will not get hurt. When you have razor blades flying around and body parts are still exposed, it's inevitable.
Yeah, but that's the thing is you talk about them flying around. I mean, there are games where nobody gets hurt.
Of course.
So yeah, I mean,
But
statistically, you're going to see an injury. I got to tell
of
you,
course.
where I see the problem is with sticks. I see the problem with sticks. Sticks are now in ounces, and you want to talk about a razor blade? I'm not worried about the razor blade on the bottom of a guy's skate. I'm worried about the razor blade that's at the tip of their stick blade. Right, that thing comes up and just nicks. I
Yeah.
mean, it just touches and cuts you open. And
You're
those things
you're
are thin, right?
you're absolutely right. But look at the example you just gave, right? And I agree with you. We're on the same page. I agree with you. But you just gave an example of something getting of affecting the head area. At least if we're going to address something, let's address the most sensitive part of the player's body, which is the
Sure,
melon.
sure. I'm, and again, but here's the thing, to your point, and to agree with your point, we've seen the progression of players who were grandfathered, didn't have to wear a helmet, and then you had new players that came into the league where they had to wear a helmet. You had players who didn't have to wear a shield, and that were grandfathered when they brought in the half shield or the visor and made that mandatory, right? So we could very well in the
Let
next
me
couple of years see where players are
listen.
required to wear full face masks, and so you
Look at
are going to
Ovechkin.
protect
Ovechkin's got
players.
the shield, right? A lot of players have the shield. Okay, Ovechkin's been playing with the shield forever. Some players play with it, some don't. But it's a you got one of the most prolific goal scorers in NHL history who's playing with a shield.
He's
Okay,
playing with a visor.
visor.
It's not a full,
But
not a full.
but
Yep.
correct. But my point is that everything he sees, he's seeing through that partial visor. Correct?
So
Hold
no,
on.
no, he's not. He's
Hold on a
not.
second.
Go ahead.
Scotty,
Go ahead.
I hear what you're saying because you have your peripheral vision, you have your vision up to the sides and below of that visor, but the visor that's tinted, and he's one of the few players that I remember him reaching out to the NHL
Yep.
what the max percentage of tint was on his visor, but he's got a tinted visor and it's lined up right in front of his eyes. Does that support 100% of his vision? Of course not. But the point of it is, if he wants to look straight, if he's skating straight, if he wants to look a little bit off to the side, it covers a majority of his vision, not all of his vision. His periphery, below, everything else is around the visor. I get it. And I know that's the direction we're going to go, right? However, if he can skate and he can do a majority of what he's doing as he's looking at a visor that goes from, like, where is it? Right above the eyebrow to right above below the eye socket, right about here. Okay, why can't they just extend that down? Why can't it just come down and protect more of the head?
Okay. Uh, and again, college players obviously are able to play with that full mask. They
Right,
are,
right.
right. So now what you're talking about
That's a
is
great point right there.
no, yeah. And so when players get a cut on their face, and they have stitches or whatever, or they get a broken jaw, they come
Right.
out, they wear a full face mask, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so yes, and that's to protect the injury. It's not to protect them from being injured. It's to protect the injury.
But shouldn't we
No, so
be more preventative?
but we get to a point, right, where you can only mandate safety to the level that the NHL players are willing to go to. And so you get to a point where if they are not willing or they are not interested in entertaining those features, then you're not going to get it.
So
You're
you're
not
saying
going to
the
get it.
NHLPA is the one who decides on the approval of the safety on
They
ice?
absolutely yes, they absolutely have input into what
Of
the
course they have
equipment is going
input,
to.
but who has the ultimate? That brings up a very good question. The NHL is putting the product on the ice. The last thing they want is for some tragic injury to happen and to show how unsafe their sport is.
I'm gonna kill your argument, but go ahead.
Go ahead, go.
So the argument is that if you want the best players on the ice, then you got to work with what the best players want to do. If you want to mandate full stuff, you may not get the best players on the ice. And again, that's why they had to grandfather wearing of helmets for new players,
Right.
but they allowed the older guys to not wear helmets.
Right.
So you literally, and so I'm with you. If I can sit down and show, like you showed those pictures.
Yeah.
So if I said to a player, you can either look like this by wearing no mask or look like this wearing a mask, logic would dictate the player should pick I want to look with a clean face. Like I want all my teeth.
I don't think the players care about how they look. Do they? Are you telling me that
no, they don't. No, they don't. But to you, like they want to keep their teeth, they want to keep their eyes.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
Logic would dictate that they would make the choice to be safe.
Yes.
However, in their opinions, in their minds, that additional mask that comes down and curves in and does all these other things affects their ability to play. It affects their ability to play at the level that is required to play in the NHL. So for them, their argument is going to be, it impairs my ability. I'm willing to take the risk, and that's what it's going to be.
Here's you brought up a good point in making a comparison to college, and this is a good discussion. I'm glad we're going down this road. Is that you made that analogy with the college players, right? If you look at college baseball, they have the option. A player has the option of using an aluminum bat or a wooden bat, but in the pros, you're only allowed to use wood. However, every player that becomes a pro has become a pro based on their performance under the terms up to that point in time. So why not continue those options right into the pros? Right? You see what I'm saying? So if you're playing in college with a full head mask, why not just tell the pros, we're going to continue that? You've been doing it your whole life anyway. Why not just do it now and be 100% safe? Look at this. It's not like we're coming at this from no record of there's no reason for us to be having this discussion. We have a litany of injury reports.
But there's a liability perspective. There's a liability perspective that exists in college and in the amateurs, meaning the Canadian Hockey League. There's a liability perspective that does not exist in the NHL. So those. Sure. But again, remember, NHL players sign a contract to be an employee, to play, right? And they also have the collective bargaining agreement. I mean, there's all those things that are in place that are different than when they are minors. So you and I could sit here and argue till we're blue in the face that we need that the sport needs to be made safer, right? I can tell you that the glove extends down to about here when you're wearing it, right? So it's loose, but it extends. So conceivably a skate coming up and hitting here, right, which is where we all think about a wrist getting cut, would be protected. However, if the player kind of falls down like this and does this, whatever, there could be ways that the equipment could be jarred loose. I mean, there's any number of things. So I guess my point to this is you can't plan for every contingency. You educate the players as best you can. It's the same thing with fighting. Right, the NHL mandated that taking off your helmet is an automatic penalty. Right, so in a fight, so you have to fight with the helmet on, or it has to become dislodged during the fight. Right. So the NHL can make some rules and enforce those rules, but again, you still have players who fight who are going to remove their helmets no matter what. Right, the NHL has mandated that linesmen jump in when players are gripping each other to prevent a fight. And what has happened? We've seen less fights in the NHL of late. They're phasing out the bruisers, where players have to be able to come in and do more than just be able to use their fists. So the game is changing in that regard. The game will continue to change, but you have to have the players themselves on board, and it's not something that fans are going to be able to change. It's not something, it's just not going to be the case.
But you have to also acknowledge the fact that all the changes that have been made to this point in time with the sport have been based on injuries to players that have occurred and finding a direct solution to preventing future injuries like the ones people have just witnessed. So what I'm saying is we're seeing guys getting sliced up. Is it important? Are you saying that it's important enough or not important enough to be addressed? Or do you feel that the players themselves just don't even care?
I'm saying that I would need to see statistically the number of players that are getting cut by skate blades in order to determine if it's an important enough issue to make a holistic change in the
Dude,
equipment that they're wearing.
these aren't hard body checks. These are people getting sliced.
I,
How much stats do you need to see on that? If I see one person get sliced, I'm like, holy crap! I need to stop this so no one else gets sliced.
right, and
How many slices do you need to see?
Okay, I guess one slice and we never play the game again.
No,
Or
I didn't say that.
or in football, somebody makes a tackle, they fall wrong. Now we don't. But I mean, that's kind of that's the end state, right? Like when you talk about how many times does somebody need to get injured before we put a stop to it? Well, ultimately, the stop would be to not play the game anymore.
I think you and I are approaching this from a little bit of a different perspective. I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete. I've played multiple sports my entire life. I've been banged up. I have no problem getting banged up. You learn how to live through pain. No big deal. You take it. You give it. Whatever. It's no big deal.
But you have a
lot of sports.
You are subjected. You're subjected to a different set of injuries.
Right, but no. Here's my point.
Playing in the sport that you play in, that's a different set of injuries.
You're right, and of all the multitude of sports that I've played my whole life, you're right. There's different injuries associated with each sport, of course. But of all the sports you could think of, how many of them have injuries that have the slicing of your body getting sliced open as one of the possible injuries?
Listen.
I mean, no, Scott.
No, stop,
seriously.
stop. But think, you have guys who have punctured lungs from taking hits that continue to play, right? They're not sliced. They went into the boards, someone hit them, cracked a rib, maybe broke a rib, and then they get another hit and it punctures the lung. They have collapsed lungs and they're playing, right? So why aren't we mandating that they wear heavier pads? So the reason why is because the heavier pads make them less able to move. That makes the game slower. Yes, it provides protection, but at that point in time, we may as well put them in those big bubbles that they have that come out in intermission playing. That.
I'm looking at where is the pinnacle of injury before it becomes unacceptable.
I'm telling you, guys get injured more from taking hits. Guys get injured more from taking hits than they do from being sliced. I'd be willing to put a soda on that. I'd be willing to put a soda on the.
I'm just surprised that you're so accepting of the fact that slicing someone's body open is okay.
But it's not a horror. It's not a horror movie, right? Like it doesn't. I don't think it's happening quite as often as you're looking.
It almost is though. We're talking about millimeters. This guy had his quarterback had his wrist sliced open, gushing blood squirting everywhere. It was like out of a horror movie. He could have been laying in a tub dying there with that type of injury.
Laying in a tub. He's in front of 18,000 people with trainers.
That's the type of injury it was. That's the exact type of injury it was. It was the same as the horror movie that you just referred to.
And it's a freak accident. You could fall down the stairs and land wrong on your neck and break it, right? You did everything you needed to do. You weren't wearing socks. Right. You were barefoot. I mean, anything can happen. When you play a sport that's a contact sport, when you play a sport that has equipment like that,
I'm willing to take a lot of risks. I'm willing to accept the percentage of potential injury associated with a lot of different sports because I know what's associated. I'm going to bang into someone. I'm going to bang body parts. I get it. I'm willing to accept those risks. But if someone says to you, you're going to be playing a sport where you might get your eye sliced out or your wrist sliced open or your leg might get gouged with, I'm going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? How come this hasn't been addressed? Well, and the first thing I'm going to think of is, what can I do to protect myself from getting sliced open?
And to your point, players are not prohibited from wearing full masks.
Okay.
Players are not prohibited. Like, there are certain restrictions on what the equipment can be made of. but players get custom equipment all the time. So if they are concerned, it is well within their purview to make equipment choices that may protect them more. There are
See, now
players
that's a different
there are
conversation,
players
which
that
is
wear neck
right,
protectors. I used to wear one when I was younger. It's just a piece of Velcro and it's a pad, right?
right,
So it's there. There are players who wear guards on the front of their skates because they're blocking shots and it's
right,
extra padding where that might
right,
happen. So the players can make the decision to do that,
right,
right? So they're not restricted from making from wearing a full mask.
right.
So to answer your question, if you say, okay, well, I don't want this to happen to me, they are able to wear that full mask, right? Or they could wear wrist
Th-
guards or something along
then we
those
get
lines.
into NHL rules as to what's acceptable and what, like you said, what they're allowed to wear, what they're not allowed to wear.
And I would tell you that a lot of times those pads, the way that those are set up, especially for shoulder pads, is to prevent injury from other players or to other
Right,
players,
right,
right? So there are certain restrictions that are there.
right,
Again, when I talk about so equipment is functional. It's not just to be worn and kind of like a suit of armor. It needs
right,
to be functional. But to your point, there is a safety aspect that could be incorporated into that.
right,
Players can make those types of choices. They just have to get whatever equipment that they're wearing that may be a little bit different than the norm, approved
right.
by the league. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you they can prove, or they've I shouldn't say they can prove because I don't want to get sued for saying it, but they can link CTE to being hit, concussed, all those types of things,
Right.
right? Like they're looking at those links. So if you told somebody, if you go play this game for 10 years, you get your head knocked around,
Right.
because every hit jars your head, every hit.
Right. Right.
You're concussed almost with every hit.
Right.
Small, but it's
Right. Right.
and it could result in brain damage. Why would anybody want to go play the game?
Right.
Well, that's a choice
Right.
that they make on their own. So
Right. I think physical contact is something that every athlete comes to grips with very early on in their development as an athlete, which goes back to maybe probably when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. You know, shooting around, kicking around, throwing around, banging around. You got siblings banging around, whatever it is. Just that contact becomes part of just nature. But you're not slinging knives at each other at an early age and trying to dodge blades slicing you open.
well, speaking for yourself, I mean, we did that stuff all the time. So there's another aspect to this too, and it could be one, and so if you kind of think about it from this perspective, and this will really kind of be the last
Yeah.
counter, I guess I would make to your point is, so each player in every team sport is an investment. So an owner invests money in a contract. They
Right.
invest, it with a salary cap, especially with roster positions.
Right.
They have to make decisions very. I don't. Frugally is not the word because they're just throwing money around, but very judiciously. They have to make those
Yes.
decisions, right? And so if these things were that common and owners wanted to protect their investment,
Yeah.
surely the owners could come together and say, we are going to mandate the following things. It's why the last time that the NHL went to the Olympics, they weren't allowed to practice. It was a liability thing. They literally were on tennis courts wearing sneakers,
Yeah. I
and
remember.
walking through.
I
Yes,
remember. Yeah.
because it was a liability. They were concerned about injuries and affecting the bottom line.
Yeah.
So I guess I would leave it to you this way: if there was enough of a concern about the injuring of the investment, would the owners not have done something by now to address it? And maybe they will.
Right.
Maybe they will. Um,
We'll
but
see.
it's something else to kind of consider. If the trend is that much, if the trend is that high, wouldn't you think the owners would somehow mandate more protection for their investment? Just something to think about.
I agree with you. It's a good discussion. I appreciate your patience on that one, but it's good. It's definitely an interesting topic.
Sure.
I believe that's a wrap for me, sir. Is that a wrap for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a good talk.
That was some good topics we covered. Good discussion. As always, people, you can always find us on 2LPucks on Twitter. 2LPucks at gmail.com is our email. 2LPucks Hockey News on YouTube. And 2LPucks Hockey Podcast on Facebook. So appreciate everyone or no one or someone who joined us tonight. But we thank you very much, and we hope to see everyone again real soon. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Take care. Yep. Take care.